I think there's an odd conception about movies based on video games that they must suffer from some curse. I think a major problem with video game-based movies is that the first one that comes to mind is 1993's Super Mario Bros. It was the first, and also the worst. The production was troubling, nobody could decide on what the film was supposed to be, actors openly talked about how much of a nightmare it was on set, critics hated it, and the box office was abysmal. It was a very terrible start to this genre of films. But if we start from here, video game movies have made vast improvements, and not just recently. One of the first trailblazers of this subgenre was Mortal Kombat. Whereas the likes of the more prolific movies of Super Mario Bros. And Street Fighter didn't exactly have a plan or a suitable production, Mortal Kombat was far different. Producer Lawrence Kasanoff, upon playing the game, had an idea of what he wanted the film to be about before a deal was even struck. Midway Games thought he was full of crap, and it took Kasanoff a long time to convince both Midway and Threshold Entertainment to let him go ahead with this project. Their concerns were worth noting, considering how troubled and unprofitable Super Mario Bros. Was. But Mortal Kombat's production went rather well, according to numerous stories from the cast and crew. Perhaps one of the most interesting aspects was the casting of Christopher Lambert in the role of Raiden. For hiring probably the most notable actor of the cast, the crew expected that he would probably not want to film with everyone else in Thailand, considering their original choice was Sean Connery, who most certainly wouldn't be joining them. Lambert, however, opted to tag along and film on location with the rest of the cast. The tech crew behind the animatronic puppet of Goro found him breaking down several times, but seemed to take it in stride. The most important thing to note about Mortal Kombat, though, is its box office. At the end of its theatrical run, the film had grossed over $100 million, which made it a financial success. Now yes, the awful and rushed sequel of Mortal Kombat Annihilation was a box office bomb, but it wouldn't take too long for more video game films to once more become box office successes. In 1999, Pokémon the first movie received so many pre-order ticket requests that Warner Brothers phone lines were jammed. The film made a ton of money from both their merchandising and the catch of promotional Pokémon cards at each weekly viewing, guaranteeing repeat business from the fans. Warner Brothers knew they had a hit on their hands, especially since the next Pokémon movie debuted in American theaters less than a year later. In 2001, Lara Croft Tomb Raider was an even bigger financial hit with a big star attached, and it went on to a sequel. The same goes for 2002's Revident Evil, which went on for 7 films. Now, none of these films were critical darlings, all receiving rotten ratings, but clearly, if they were making money, there was an audience for these films. Now sure, there are certainly more box office failures than triumphs within this subgenre, but the financial wins in this subgenre range from mild returns on profit to blockbuster status. This is a key component because this is more or less what studios are looking for when deciding what they'll spend their money on. And since video game movies are usually heavy on the theatrics and special effects, they need all the budget that they can get. While many video game films have ended up being failures, studios can keep taking the risk because if they manage to get it right, they could be the next Resident Evil, garnering massive money and multiple sequels. And the box office continues to rise in these movies, considering the top 3 earning video game films were made within the past 5 years. The top one being Warcraft, with a worldwide gross of $439 million. Okay, so these movies make money, but what about the critical consensus? Okay, yeah, video game films have historically had low rating averages among critics. However, if you want to go based on the Rotten Tomatoes percentage, which I have to admit is an overly simplistic method to grade a picture's quality considering how many goofy narratives can form around mere aggregate number disparities, video game films have risen from the lower ranks of Rotten. In 2018, the latest iteration of Tomb Raider and the Dwayne Johnson starring Rampage became the first video game films to reach the 50% range. Then, the following year, Detective Pikachu was the first to reach fresh status, even if it was only a percentage of 69%. This was then followed by the Angry Birds Movie 2, which had an even higher percentage. Though these numbers are not directly indicative of a film's quality or even an average rating, the percentage does need to be taken note of in cases where one would want to claim milestones to such a simplistic degree. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog was praised at one point as the highest rated of video game movies for a fresh score of 64%. Except this statement isn't true. Detective Pikachu had a slightly higher score, and the Angry Birds Movie 2 had an even higher percentage of 73%, making that film the highest rated video game film ever on Rotten Tomatoes. Bear in mind, this is not to suggest that based on this data, Angry Birds is objectively better than Sonic as a movie. But if you're going to use Rotten Tomatoes as a metric for this aspect of the video game curse, you can't pretend that subsequent fresh video game movies did not already pass these milestones, especially when they're so close together. The last 3 video game films of Detective Pikachu, the Angry Birds Movie 2, and Sonic the Hedgehog have all made history with fresh ratings and box office rankings that range from profitable to major successes. It's clear that these films have become, at the very least, suitably passable. And that's good. That's progress for video game movies, and any trace of a curse has all but lifted. However, there's a new curse which may be on the horizon as video game movies enter a new age. The age of average. While I throw no shade towards those who genuinely enjoyed Sonic the Hedgehog as a movie, I've noticed that fans of the film have been remarking that the film wasn't a complete disaster, being good, but not great. For the many video game fans who have taken punches to the face with movie adaptations of their favorite properties, good is good enough to claim a victory that this genre has found a cozy home within the genre of family adventure films. But I can't help but feel if these video game films are going to become more frequent, that we shouldn't have to settle for a film not being a disaster, especially when the genre itself has come such a long way. I'm bringing this up because we're on the verge of another notable video game movie hitting theaters, a Super Mario Bros. Movie. The film is going into production with Illumination Studios, famously known for the Despicable Me movies. Though the film is being produced by Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, it's also being produced by Chris Meledandri, the founder of Illumination. He has been a producer on every Illumination animated film, and while they have all been quite profitable on such small budgets for animation, they have also had wildly fluctuating critical consensus. A commonality I've noticed between their most notable productions of Despicable Me and The Secret Life of Pets is that they find funny stuff to animate, but don't really have all that compelling a story to go along with their gags. You can see the ideas dwindle in their sequels. In Despicable Me, the central story is that Gru wants to prove himself as a villain, but when he ends up adopting 3 little girls, he decides to become a father instead. This is simplistic, but cute. In Despicable Me 3, however, Gru meets his identical brother and they have to stop a villain of tired 1980s references. In The Secret Life of Pets, the dog Jack learns to live with the dog Duke and evade the evil bunny Snowball, who feels that humanity has wronged him. In The Secret Life of Pets 2, Jack and Duke learn to adjust with a child in the house, and have to stop some mustache-twirling circus villain who imprisons a tiger. Illumination's films thus far have been lukewarm at best and formulaically meandering at their worst. But given that most of these films have generated stellar profits, it's unlikely that they'll stray too far from a surefire formula for a property like Mario. After all, wouldn't Nintendo just love to be the first video game movie to have a $100 million opening? Illumination films have had that. Based on the track record of Illumination, I'd speculate that the film will probably be a somewhat standard adventure picture for kids. There will be some corny and dated jokes that'll arrive 10 years too late. Mario and Luigi will have to save the princess. They'll drift apart as the brothers don't feel their relationship is equal. They'll eventually team up in the end to defeat Bowser. The film will close out with a dance sequence, and then some sequel bait with Wario in the mid-credits scene or something. Now, of course, I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm wrong. Because it would not only be a relief to have a video game movie that was great for more than just not being a disaster, but it would also mark a turning point for Illumination. Their films up to this point have ranged from meh to mediocre, and they could really use a critical home run. But regardless of whatever the film turns out to be, you just know that an immediate defense of the film will be, hey, at least it's not as bad as 1993's Super Mario Bros. Yeah, it might be, but we've come a long way from that movie, and I don't think we should merely settle for a film being better than a similar property film from over 20 years ago, which was by all accounts a disaster. So to sum up, there is no longer a video game movie curse. Neither financially, if going off box office numbers, or critical consensus, if we're going strictly off the mostly misread Rotten Tomatoes profiles. Just based on the tenets of what makes a bad film, practically all these aspects were resolved by 2019. Video game films are no longer disasters. They're now average? So congrats to video game films on reaching the age of averageness. Let's not stay here too long and strive for more.